Thanks for tuning in to Season 4 of Strange, Rare, and Peculiar Homeopathy Podcast, where homeopathy lives, breathes, and evolves with Denise Straiges and Alastair Gray. We'll be exploring modern practice, research, and philosophy, from Hahnemann's radical insights to today's breakthroughs and discoveries. Get ready for homeopathy woes, feedback from pros, and the more you knows.
Hey, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good everything else.
Good day.
Good day, mate.
Given that we are in the Southern Hemisphere, for those of you who are seeing us on video, it's not winter here.
It's not winter, but it's not hot.
Technically, right. It's technically summer, but it's not warm.
Yeah.
Think more Arctic Circle than equator.
Antarctic. Yeah.
I said Arctic, Antarctic.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Penguins.
Because it's only 4,000 kilometers from here.
Yes, it is. So here we are.
Yeah.
We're recording in a little while.
It's been too long.
Let's hope everybody had great holidays.
Yeah. Firstly, holidays, the break, the celebrations, whatever the celebrations are.
Yep.
Whoops.
Whoa.
And I mean, we had to take down our Christmas tree.
Yeah, early.
And it just went up.
Because look, we're right we're right next to each other. So I'm having to fight looking over there. I'm gonna look at you on the screen. There you go. Yeah, because we left on the 29th of December.
The Christmas tree was down on the 29th. It's not long enough. It needs to go deep into January. Folks, if you got any opinions about how long the Christmas tree should stay, then let us know.
Yeah.
And we have traveled to the other end of the world, and we are in tomorrow. So we're always ahead.
Yeah.
And we can report the lotto numbers if you so wish.
That's funny.
It is actually.
We have a lot to talk about. And yeah, we have a lot to talk about. So I am looking for actually where I wanted to start.
I want to start with becoming reacquainted with my favorite food group.
Pie.
No,
a fruit pie. We're doing a meat pie.
Yeah.
Tell them about the pie you had yesterday. It
was something. It came in a box,
Mhm.
and and I heated it up magnificently well. Probably a little bit too long, but the middle was perfect, and it was a wallaby pie. Now before,
Can't get over it.
I know, and on the box it said, if you're eating this pie, you are doing the environment in this country a great service.
That's all.
And thank you very much.
Needed was for someone to tell you that eating more pies was your civic duty.
Well, it's
there's really
yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to justify a whole lot of things there, but for someone that appreciated the warm meat pie growing up, to live in a wasteland, a desert of
a pie desert. Technically, it's not a pie. When we lived in Brooklyn, there was a pie company right at the end of our road called Duck Pies Down Under Bakery, and they had the quintessential Australian and Kiwi pie. But they closed during COVID. We were actually getting them delivered. Yeah.
Not saying.
But that's a story for another day.
It is really, and thank you for indulging me.
You're welcome. So
what do we got?
So I thought what we would do is I really want to do this other style of, I want to do interim podcasts about aphorisms. If you ever want to hear, though, a podcast that is just someone reading the organon, our dear friend and colleague, Kelly Callahan, who's one of our core teachers at AHE, she's one of my dearest friends. I love Kelly to the moon and back. She recorded the organon, and there's like a little musical intro and everything, and she just reads the aphorisms. She's got a good reading voice. So you can do that. Ours is going to be a little bit different. And
you're saying we don't have good reading voices?
We have fine reading voices, but our intention was not to read through the organon, but rather to present different aphorisms with some commentary on it. But I really want to do it in the style of my favorite podcast, which is called Fashion Neurosis, by Bella Freud. I think I mentioned it.
Do I get to lie down?
Well, that's what I want to do. I want you to lie down, because she has people lie down on the couch, and she sits there. She's the great granddaughter of Sigmund Freud, and she always asks the question. And she's got this great sort of voice, and she's really super cool. She's a fashion designer. She always starts with, "Tell us what you're wearing
And why?
and why." And then, and it's the best, it is the best podcast for learning how to be a case taker. If you listen to this, and you can find, the last one we listened to, she interviewed Nick Cave, but she interviews Debbie Harry from Blondie. There's one,
Helena Bonham Carter.
oh, I love that. That was a really good one. And actually, that was one of my favorite ones, because Helena Bonham Carter, who, known for many roles, including Bellatrix Lestrange.
A Room with a View.
Yeah, Room with a View is probably I loved her as Bellatrix, because she's just so. In fact, I should have my Bellatrix hair. I sometimes will inadvertently have Bellatrix.
Yeah, right.
Hair. Yeah, that would have been a good choice for today. But anyway, when she goes, "I killed Sirius Black." Anyway, but so this, what I thought would be really cool is to have, like, reading an aphorism and then having the person on the couch just sort of having their reaction to it. But that'll be another day. So
Just imagine I'm lying flat. I'm horizontal right now. In the healthy condition of man.
Exactly. So I was thinking, and now actually we sort of discussed where this podcast is going to go. Maybe this aphorism isn't the best one, but we're going to start with aphorism 9. I think it's a good one to start off the year with, aphorism 9. And so I'm going to read it.
It's everyone's favorite. And if it's not, it's everyone's second favorite aphorism.
Yeah, I think you're right. Everybody loves aphorism 9. And so I'm going to read it from it's the same in the 5th and 6th editions of the Organon. In the Boerke translation, it doesn't change. And so it reads, "In the healthy condition of man, the spiritual vital force, the dynamis that animates the body, rules with unbounded sway and retains all the parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation as regards both sensations and functions, so that our indwelling, reason-gifted mind can freely employ this living, healthy instrument for the higher purpose of our existence. Be still, my heart."
Can I tell you something funny? A client.
Yeah.
This is not too long ago. It was in student clinic. One of their presenting symptoms was, "I want to get back my unbounded sway."
Was it a homeopathy student?
It was a homeopathy student.
Oh my gosh.
I want to have better unbounded sway.
I'd get vertigo if my sway got more unbounded.
Yeah. And so interesting interpretation of that. And I did my best to disabuse them of a slight misinterpretation of what the unbounded sway was. But it's beautiful use of language, isn't it? I love that translation. And I usually insert a different word from living healthy instrument to skin bag. Because it's the skin. The owner of the skin bag is freely employing this healthy living instrument, the skin bag, the meat suit, for the highest. I always say highest, but you read higher.
Well, because I am reading this from this one particular translation. Each translation is going to be different. I pulled up the Wendell Riley translation as one.
What does she say? Highest?
First, I have to say, if you are watching this on video, you're going to see that it looks a little bit like a Japanese Godzilla movie, because the internet is not doing its thing. Have you noticed, Al, when you're talking, that you're moving in a different?
I had not.
No. Okay. Anyway, so and now I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it from the Wendell O'Reilly translation. I actually got an email from Wenda just a couple of hours ago that her revision on the translation from this one she did 30 years ago, and she's revised the translation, and she sent me a copy, asked me to review, which is an honor. I mean, that just feels like who, me? Thanks. Anyway, and even though Wenda has, she acknowledges there are issues with the translation, which is why she wants to redo it. But I like the structure, even though I get that there are things in the translation, like we talk about this in school. We use the Wenda O'Reilly 6th edition of the Organon, because it's the way that she has put it together, the fact that there's a glossary and an index, the sidebars, just the way that it's laid out. She's got chapters and chapter headings. I think makes it easier for students. And so when you're a student, parsing a few words isn't going to make a huge difference. When you're really studying something for, to go beyond concept, then we'll always pull all the multiple translations so that we can look at the differences and we'll use the most appropriate. Anyway, because I know people, well, I was going to say people are fussy about the translations. I mean, talk about projection. But I think it's interesting to look at that and say, well, when it comes to teaching, sometimes the structure and the format of a book makes it so much easier for students to sort of grok the whole picture that I like it. And I'm like Wanda, she's a bud. Anyway, Aphorism 9. So this is just a slightly different.
Try it with a German accent.
All my accents start out one way and they all end up sounding horrible. Anyway, in the healthy condition of man, the spiritual vital force, the dynamis that animates the material body, rules with unbounded sway and retains all the parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation as regards both sensations and functions, so that our indwelling reason, gifted mind, can freely employ this living, healthy instrument for the higher purpose of our existence. Also not highest.
I just did the sign language version.
Don't say that. You don't do sign language. You were acting it as more of an interpretive dance.
Interpretive dance. Highest purposes of our existence.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the reasons that we thought about this aphorism for today is because one of the things that we want to talk about, well, actually, okay, in all fairness, the thing we tried not to talk about. So we've attempted for the last couple of weeks to record a podcast, and we keep coming back to the same topic, and we keep saying, no, we want to like have this sort of content that is educational content and so forth. And yet we can't get away from this issue, which is around some of the challenges that we want the community to really be thinking about so that we can move forward in homeopathy as strong as possible. And so I've been working on, and we've been having conversations about kind of looking at other frameworks that have really suffered over time when,
depending on your perspective.
well, yeah, I suppose so, with anything, right? When commoditization has taken over and the true roots are, kind of the roots come to the surface as opposed to going all the way down to their deepest point, that the ways in which standards erosion by way of like the market growth can push things into convenience over depth, right? Or trying to get accessibility, making something accessible to everyone. Everybody gets a trophy. What it does is it really dilutes what a thing is. And so how can we work to have homeopathy available to people in the best way possible without compromising the standards of what it really is? And so I think aphorism 9, like if you have to choose an aphorism 9 speaks to the depth, right? That this isn't just your sinuses will be clear, your snot will no longer be green, your poop will not have streaks of blood in it, you will not have, the tic de la rue in your abdomen. Quick quiz. Who presented with a tic de la rue of the abdomen in 18? Oh, you, sir, with the bald head.
Melanie.
Right, Melanie Hahnemann. If you listen to, we had the replay of my favorite of our podcast, just because I really love the story of Melanie. Anyway, so it's not just about the eradication of a single symptom. It's about the sort of bringing a person into harmony, right? Harmonious vital operation, so that we can reach the higher purpose of our existence. That's a different mandate. It really does say that there's something important there. Now,
Well, it's not It doesn't say my existence, it says our existence. And yeah, and that's an important one because because it's a definition of health at the end of the day.
It is.
Aphorism 9 says for the healthy person to be considered healthy, this is what happens. The energy flows through and around, and the bag in vital operation holds the owner of it, and together they're working for the highest purposes of our existence. And so it's not a small fingernail vision kind of definition of health. It's a very broad one. And I think, you if I could translate what you were just saying, because you were couching your language there, I noticed, just from a little bit of familiarity.
You mean I wasn't cussing about it?
Well, you weren't cussing about it, but what Denise was saying is that as homeopathy has gone from 3% of the population to 4% of the population to 5 or 7% of the population, those folks that are users of homeopathy or new users of homeopathy are not like how homeopathy was found in the old days. Sometimes now homeopathy is found through Facebook or influencers or whatever, like that kind of thing. And so people are not finding it organically through their own, personal work, through their deep personal work, and therefore the style, the version of homeopathy they're finding is often quite divorced from from the Aphorism 9 version that we've just spoken about.
Yeah, there are some challenges that come with scaling up. And so what does it mean to scale up? And I want to talk about that in a minute. But before we leave the Aphorism 9 through the core of it, there's I've got this, so I have this notebook, if you can see. It's a strange, very peculiar. And it's a place where I keep my ongoing notes of thoughts about sort of the conversations that we want to have with the folks who are interested in kind of best practices in homeopathy. And so one of the things that I wrote about on the 12th of January, while sitting in my favorite cafe in the world. It's got a different name than Taste Nature, doesn't it? There's this organic market called Taste Nature here in Dunedin, New Zealand, and they have a cafe, and the whole cafe is gluten-free, and it's like delicious hippie food, which is totally what I roll. Yeah, green juice, kombucha on tap, amazing soup, these wraps. Anyway, I love it, and because it's all gluten-free, I can order anything on the menu, and it's delicious. Anyway, so I was sitting there having a green juice and some breakfast one day. And one of the things that I was writing about was the big picture perspective of homeopathy that is inclusive of not just our individual symptomology, but rather everything from our relationship to ourself to our connection to nature and the world around us. And that is this idea of the macrocosm and the microcosm, right? The macrocosm being everything, all possibility, and the microcosm being, sort of our individuality. And that there is this connection between the microcosm, the individual, and everything that is around us. And you think about like little kids in Sunday school, where is God? God is everywhere. Where is God? God is in me. It's like we learn this even in the most simplistic way, that sort of this universal life force is a part of all of us in this way. Anyway, and so there's this shift in global health to this One Health concept, which is a recognition that the individual is affected by everything. I mean, it seems like when right, to people who are kind of awake to these things, but that the air that we breathe, that the water, that the health of the entire ecosystem, from the water to the reef to the to the fish, to the land animals, to all all the way up to the birds, to the to everything. It affects everything about the individual, and how now, and not so much from the interconnectedness of all things perspective, but rather from the idea that zoonotic diseases are now jumping into the human space. So COVID-19, you can look at it and say it's a lab virus. You can look at it and say it came from a wet market in China. it doesn't matter. If you look at any of the large outbreaks of infectious disease, there's always an animal component, whether it's bird flu, swine flu, whatever the case may be. And that Hahnemann talks about this in, what's the aphorism when he talks about the meteoric and telluric influences?
Mm.
It's in the acute chronic disease. It's in the epidemic. So it'd be 100 to 102. Yeah. So probably 101 is my guess. Anyway, but the idea is that, for the One Health idea is that we got a problem. So if zoonotic diseases are jumping to the humans, then we have a problem that we need to learn how to solve. And what's interesting is if you're looking at through the lens of autoimmunity, one of the things that I've been working on for a while in my research on PANS and PANDAS and on autoimmune diseases is the way in which the that when we I'll try to make this super simple, but the relationship between the eradication of an acute viral or bacterial disease or fungal disease, right? So if you kill off one, I'm going to just call it a biological entity, that you are disrupting the entire ecosystem. So the short-term acute gain can result in a long-term chronic issue, and it could be months, years, or a generation away. A corrupted, microbiome, which is the word of the day, in a mom who's pregnant is going to impact that baby. So if you have a mom that takes antibiotics during pregnancy and then, is a strep B carrier who gets antibiotics while she's in delivery and then winds up with a C-section and it's more antibiotics and this child doesn't come out in the natural way to get all of the ways in which the biome was populated, you're going to wind up with a corrupted system, which can wind up with chronic disease. And this is something that we are seeing. Anywho, so this One Health concept is kind of like 101 to that idea, right? But one of the things that I'm loving in sort of the global research and applications of homeopathy is the ways in which some of the researchers, particularly in Brazil, they are kind of leading on this, where they're looking at, like Leonie Bornemann, looking at, she had all of her PhD students, right? Yeah, at the AIH conference at UConn, not this past one, but the one before. And they were looking at water health and soil health and, all the different ways in which a homeopathic remedy can work to create an ecosystem, say in the water, that's going to affect the fish. All of this. So this is this sort of idea that we've got within a homeopathic remedy, so many ways that we can look at this as above, so below concept. We can look at the macrocosm and the microcosm really particularly. So for example, if you have Hahnemann says in Aphorism 269, and in fact, he modifies Aphorism 269 between the 5th and the 6th edition. I'm just going to read a little bit of that. When he's talking about how any substance in the universe, even if it is not considered a medicinal substance, when prepared according to principles, actually has the capacity to become something curative. Sorry, I've got my document up that is the comparison between the 5th and the 6th editions, because I like to look at those changes are often really important. Anyway, so in the 6th edition, Hahnemann adds a big chunk, right? So in the 5th edition, it just says, the homeopathic system of medicine develops for its use to a hitherto unheard of degree the spirit-like medicinal powers of the crude substances by means of a process peculiar to it, and which has hitherto never been tried, whereby only they all become penetratingly efficacious and remedial, even those that in the crude state give no evidence of the slightest medicinal power on the human body. So that's even in the 5th edition that he's saying that. And he goes further in the 6th edition to talk about how the quality that changes in the 6th edition the quality that changes in the manufacturing process actually brings out this spirit-like, medicinal power. So if people talk about the organon as a spiral. I think Jeremy Sher says in the introduction to Wenda's first 6th edition translation, where he talks about a string of pearls. I think that's where I'm getting that from, and where these aphorisms are attached to each other in these different ways. And so what we're hearing in 269 is kind of a reprise in some ways of the macrocosm and the microcosm with Aphorism 9. Because you pointed out the word our, right? In
Yeah.
Aphorism 9, that it's about all of us. It's like the one health concept. It's not just the individual, it's the individual and their relationship to each other.
Mm.
And in 269, Hahnemann reinforced
in a
that.
complex, interrelated system.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a complex, interrelated system.
And the thing that gets me, sorry, if I can just weigh on in here, because we're complex systems, and the butterfly that flaps its wings over there affects us here. We all know that from a banal sort of physics point of view. But Denise is not wrong. So the soil health and the state of the soil affects the wheat that grows in it, which affects my nose when I eat it.
Yeah.
All of that. And so we've got to remember that homeopathy has the homo part in it. It's not the same part in it. And so the concept is that we are looking for something similar. And sometimes the similar is the tree that's been turned into a homeopathic remedy. Like you said, what is it, 269?
269.
Yeah, see, I think about lycopodium, which is an inert spore of the moss or the fern, whatever.
Right. Let's talk about its inert quality such that it's used as a coating on a pill because it is inert.
And so that point, you can say the same thing about, I think, most of the tree provings. I mean, trees, where's the toxicity in the tree? There's some which, northern
Deposits
Queensland,
tree, yeah.
deposits gum, which ruins the paint on your car. There's some toxicity to some trees, but most tree remedies in homeopathy have been made out of the root or the bark or the sap or the leaf. And in and of themselves, none of those parts would be considered toxic. So I like what you're saying about just reminding us that, in nature, it's surprising what something does.
Right.
And our only job is to find out what it does. That means provings, do provings.
Well, that's Aphorism 20.
Yeah.
Hold it.
Hold it.
Going back here.
So while she's scrolling, I'll start filling in the silence and the gap,
So, because, nope, that's something. Oh. Gosh, this is what happens when we're doing this organically.
20 is a nice aphorism. It splits it's the end of the first chapter and the beginning of the really critical second chapter.
So, and he changes it in 5th and 6th edition. So I'm just going to read the 6th edition. It says, the spirit-like power. Once again, this idea of the spirit-like power. And this is really important because when we're talking about, because there are conversations happening now within the sort of commodity part of homeopathy, which is the sale, well, it's sale of goods and services, right? Of how we make a remedy. So if anyone is going to be having a conversation about manufacturing processes and they can't tell you about the spirit-like power to offer the spirit-like power within a substance, that's
totally
right. Anyway, the spirit-like power to alter man's state of health and hence to cure diseases, which lies hidden in the inner nature of medicines, can in itself never be discovered by us in a mere effort of reason. It is only by experience of the phenomena it displays when acting on the state of health of man that we can become clearly cognizant of it.
It's an empirical experience and experiment that we can ever know anything about what a drug does, what a remedy does.
You cannot by intellectualization alone understand what it does.
Yeah.
And this is why when people say,
so clear. I don't know. For me, there's such clarity in that.
There's total clarity.
What do we do? We're homeopaths. What does that mean? We do similars. How do we get similars? We do provings. Full stop.
So when people say, oh, well, and even people go, oh, the old literature, like when people use tradition as evidence, it's kind of dicey because just because it's old doesn't mean that it's right. And, there's dementia. Anyway.
Well, there's also that's the reason that evidence-based medicine came to being, because of the misuse of expert opinion.
That's right.
So
if you look at, so people will say, oh, the old provings of nosons, just as an example. So Samuel Swan, Swan and Berridge are folks, they were two of the homeopaths who were responsible for a lot of the early nosode provings. And these would be milk remedies and traditional nosodes, which are remedies made from disease products. And what Swan says, and because we're not at home, I don't have all my paper notes.
We'll make it up.
Sure that he says this about morbillinum, which is the measles nosode. He says, well, we don't need an actual proving because we have all the information we need from our clinical data.
I know what you're saying. But it's actually not morbulonum. But it
It's
doesn't
swan.
matter. Yeah.
It's definitely swan.
Yeah. He's saying that we've already got the provings because we've got the toxicology. No,
No,
wrong,
because that takes
wrong.
53, which I'm not going to scroll from 20 to 153. But 153 is the strange, rare, peculiar, or the most characteristic symptom representative of the state of the disease the human has. And that's what you need to find. You're not going to get that from toxicology, and the uniqueness of provings. Anyway, but there's another thing about this, which I love, which Aphorism 20 takes us back to One Health, because there's a way that approving is a transmutational process.
Hmm.
A healthy person, definition of health notwithstanding, right? Because we're tracking the baseline resilience,
Healthy enough.
healthy enough person for whom we know their baseline level of resilience and what their standard things are. So we know if it's new or an amplification of their existing symptoms.
Mm.
Okay. That person comes in and they are, healthy enough, and they get sick from taking a remedy,
An artificial
an artificial
disease in a bottle.
That's right. And so this idea of approving is redemptive suffering in a way. That's what I think about it as. It is the
That's very, very Catholic of you. I like it.
mean, you can take the girl out of you can't take the Catholicism out of the girl.
All right.
So this idea though of redemptive suffering, to me, aphorism 20 it's the alchemy aphorism, because it is a transmutational experience where a healthy person has an experience that transmutes inside of them. They put out symptoms that are in service to humanity.
Herring says, we suffer and we love it and we come back for more.
I don't know that I loved the suffering.
Well, you had a particular experience, didn't you? Let's leave that one, actually. We'll leave that.
Talked about too many
Yeah.
times. But, I'm always glad when I do a proving and it's not a vomit proving. Speaking of trees, we were just talking about, it was a proving that Eric Summerman did back in, I think it was the tamarack tree. Someone will remind us, one of the Minnesotans who participated in it. That was a vomit proving. It was these tent caterpillar, or maybe it wasn't the tree, it was a caterpillar. It was the tent caterpillar, and they were deforesting all the trees, and all these people like ate they were just eating, gorging, and vomiting. It was an awful experience. Yeah.
How did we get there?
Because you and I were talking about it the other day. Do I remember that conversation?
No, I don't remember that part. But so I kind of like where we're going, but let's just, let's tie up some, I mean, tie up to finish, but I mean, let's make sure that we've got all of the threads sewn in, because
enough, right? I'm starting with this idea that homeopathy is not just about, let me take a pill for this one symptom. There is something, this is a part of a type of healing that is, it's not just mind, body, medicine, it's body, mind, spirit. Kent talks about the will. Now, granted, there's a lot of the Swedenborgian stuff that altered, post-Kantian homeopathy. We'll leave that out, but I think it's the recognition, beginning with Hahnemann, that when a person has a true deep healing experience with a homeopathic remedy, that it has the capacity to alter that person to a higher level of being. It's almost like a refinement of our resonance. Does that mean that you have to believe that in order to come out of shock if you were to be given aconite in an ambulance? No. But does homeopathy, at its full expression, have within the paradigm that possibility? Yes. So what does that mean? That to me, so when I was thinking about this, because we're really grappling with how do we deal with, so one of the things at the outset I want to say is that for us, just to kind of be transparent about our goals, our goal is to call people in, not call people out. And so how do you take what is basically an aberration in the growth process of homeopathy, where there are ways in which it's kind of going outward, and discuss that in a way that is respectful but also truthful about what's happening. And so we've been trying really hard to find examples and to do some real kind of processing before a podcast to talk about this because I think it's hard. I think these are hard conversations. I think what we have been asking the community to do is to be self-reflective about ourselves as we're a part of the growth of this sort of industry of homeopathy. And so that's where we're coming from. And I feel like I want to say that because I think when we're really clear about it, then we can come together to have a conversation in a way that isn't threatening.
Mm.
And I say that because I receive, let's just call them correspondences that would be threatening, being, we hear from people that were dogmatic or whatever. I mean, we've been called names and stuff. And it's like that's on the people who are doing that. Like that's their thing. We're not having that conversation. So as we go forward and have these discussions, please know that it's coming from a place in our hearts, which is we want to see homeopathy and all the people that use it thrive. We want to see everybody have, if you're involved in the business of homeopathy, a healthy and thriving business. But we can't get there unless we ask the hard questions of ourselves, of our practice, and of what we do. To me, that's really important.
So what are the analogies?
So one of the ones that I've been working, well, actually, we're working on a couple of them. The one that has really come clear to me is using the idea of yoga and the growth of yoga. But before we get there, I want to add one other framework. So I've been thinking about this because I teach this class, and I just taught it last week, which is in our semester 4. So at AHE, we have 4 semester program. The 4th semester is kind of the equivalent of a post-grad program. So it's stuff beyond what is part of the achievement requirement. But it's what we believe a practitioner needs to really understand to kind of get to the depth of it. And and this is open to anyone who graduates from a homeopathy school. If you want to do our semester 4, it's totally fine. I'm not trying to sell that here. I'm just trying to put it in the context. Anyway, and so one of the conversations that we have, one of the opening conversations in that semester is around critical thinking in contemporary homeopathy. How do we take a great thinker, contemporary thinker, and find, like they might have brought a bunch of stuff into the field, and maybe not all of it is amazing, but maybe a piece of it is. Well, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We also don't want to look at all information just because somebody said it that it's true, and especially in digital spaces where if you are, let's say that you're using a repertory, one of the software platforms, like we all use Radar Opus. Well, if you do a search in Radar Opus, all the information is going to come out as if equal. It's not going to say that the work that Jan Schulten put out in his first book on where he's using extrapolative information about remedies, that's no longer true once you've got a proving on it. That was speculative information. So like we sort of have to take the democratization of information and create a hierarchy of truth inside of it. And, so anyway, so we've got this whole suite of lectures about critical thinking. Yeah. And so when I teach this one, the opening of it, I think is important. It just gives me a framework here. It's a 3-pronged critical analysis or a framework for the community to engage in critical thinking. And so the 3 prongs are first about the substance, right? So if you're looking at a substance, it's a really interesting conversation because you can look at the substance and say, okay, is this something that is being used homeopathically? It's really just about investigation of the substance. So for example, you might talk about imponderables. Yeah. And there will be a great conversation where people will say, well, I think imponderables are insane. And then you might say, well, then let's look at how Hahnemann introduced the remedy Sol, or the poles of the magnet, or how in his discussion of ammonium carbonicum, instead of making it from ammonium, from the carbonate of ammonium, which would have been chemically available to him, in its powdered form, he burned a stag's horn, right, which would be the alchemical process of creating ammonium substances. So I think that there are rich discussions just about the substances. I think there are people for whom aphorism 269 is a stretch. There are people who would tell you that the 126 remedies, or no, it's up to in the TBR2, 128,
135.
135 substances that are part of Hahnemann's original.
Mm.
That's what, that's what is available. And okay, so it's a conversation. It's not like good, bad. It's just, okay, so one prong of it would be, what kind of substances are we working with? I think we have to have a really big discussion about it when it comes to nosodes, right? Any kind of biological material. What is the chain of custody? What is the reproducibility? If you're talking about a nosode that is disease product, is it the same? It's like nobody is asked. I shouldn't say nobody. We need to be asking the question.
Yeah.
Is snot, if you're doing a proving from someone who has a cold, is the snot going to be different than the saliva, or from the from the expectoration? Or should it come from the blood? Should it come from the lymph?
Or should it come from the agar plate that actually is cultivating the bug?
There you go. So where is it coming from?
Right.
What is the chain of custody? The example I always bring up, just because it was part of my thesis, was herring and Suriname, right? So he's getting this pus from, he says, quote, an otherwise healthy Negro. In 1830, he was in Suriname. That's probably a slave. So if we're using material from an enslaved person in 1830, we need to have a conversation about the ethics of that. We also have to have a conversation about the fact that he was testing that same material in 1856. How was he carrying and transporting his pus? So I think it's a legitimate question to ask if you're going to give that remedy to someone. And you have to ask, was it actually scabies? That's the disease associated with it.
Mm.
When you read the description of it, it doesn't sound like scabies. So it's just one example, right?
Mhm.
But that's the substance. If you're using tautopathic substances, what are you just working from the toxicology? How many tautopathic provings do we have? We're going to talk about the provings and experience next. But like, if you're talking about these substances, like, I think as a community, we need to really think about that. We need to think about SAR codes. They were not a part of the lexicon of homeopathy ever. So what is their place when used potentized? Doesn't mean you can't conduct provings on them and consider them, but just because someone introduces them, right? It's a conversation. Same goes with bowel nosodes. All of the like polyvowel. I mean, we need to be, anyway, you get the point. So prong one is the substance, right? Okay.
Yeah, love it.
It's how do we get our aphorism 20 evidence from it, the proving, right? So you've got sort of consideration of what the substance is. And then prong two is, how do you know about the substance? If it doesn't have a proving, right? Then, or if the proving is done in a way that is methodologically different than the Hahnemannian mandate, then that's a question. So for example, trituration provings, right? I think we've talked about this in anything I can find about the production of the medicine. It's C3, triturate, grind and scrape to C3, very specific instructions.
3 hours.
For 3 hours, grind and scrape, right? For about an hour, then go C2 and so forth. So the fact that some contemporary folks are doing provings and publishing information based on a C4 trituration proving, which is basically a contact high, and that they claim is a spiritual experience. Well, we need to have a lot of data on that because that's completely different than the extraction of spirit from matter that Hahnemann talks about. That's evidentiary and 230 years of experience. We don't know. So if you're not thinking about or asking that question and you're giving a remedy for which the information only comes from C4 trituration proving or dream proving or a meditation proving, right? A meditation proving, see people sitting, holding the remedy in their hands and having an experience. I'm not negating the fact that there are people who have, incredible intuitive capacity within them. Like if we're talking about the commoditization of something and scaling it up for the general public, I think we are ethically bound to have consistency in our practice, or at least reproducibility. Maybe I'm kooky.
No, you're not kooky.
Yeah.
Keep going. I'm loving what I'm hearing.
Right. And so then there has to be consistency of evidence. And just because the old information tells us something, some of it is a little bit sketchy. The Senicula proving, for example, people who drink the water from a particular pond or a particular lake, sorry, it's like, and it's like one family and the maid and somebody got some rheumatism, right? That's Sinicular? Or is that's not Carlsbad?
I know what you're talking about, and I'm wondering if it's
Scoop of Chuck.
if it is a
They
Scoop
might
Chuck.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they're you see how there's this, like, if we're just talking about thinking critically, right? Like, we get so excited about these medicines because we want them to be available everywhere. Everyone needs to have them. We need access. Well, if no one tells you that behind the scenes, the man behind the curtain is trying to make a buck, and your kid is sick with a new, an emerging disease like pandas, for which, the backup in the medical community is not there, it's really difficult. Like, are you going to choose between seeing somebody who doesn't have education, real education in homeopathy, who's giving a medicine they haven't been taught to think critically about, for which we do not have appropriate manufacturing standards and pharmacological process, and you're going to give it to your kid who's suffering from something, and you're choosing between that and like rituximab or plasmapheresis? Like, that's crazy town. That's just crazy town. So in the middle of this three-pronged critical analysis, I think is the most important thing. It's like, okay, whatever the substance is, it's like sometimes we are going beyond what most people are going to think, like, oh, can you really create a medicine from, Saul or, whatever. But then I think the rubber hits the road with what exactly are we giving? So, like, if we're talking about, some of these medicines that are being sold to doctors, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, that have almost 200 homeopathy 200 ingredients in it, right? Many of them in X potency. We have zero understanding about how all of these substances act together. And then this one particular substance, it's got like, I forget, it's got like 180 doses.
Mm.
And then you're told to give it 3 times a day. So what does it mean for a person to get 600 doses of medicine every day when we don't have that information? Like, I think that ethically, right, if we're going to make this a mainstream medical modality and nobody's talking about it, then, like, shame on us. All right. And then the third thing, because we could go on about that middle one. The middle one to me is like where the action is, right? But then the third one is the analytical framework and the methodology that a clinician uses to make their decision. And this is where it's funny, because I think when people get upset with us and complain that we're being exclusive, they're thinking about this third prong, which is the point one. What, how are you taking your case? What's your methodology? Are you looking at the sensation? Are you looking at, whatever, what repertorization software are you using? Like, that to me is just like, that is small potatoes. It's like 1 and 3 are kind of, they're important, right? You need to know what you're doing, but it's really about, this middle part of, like, what are we giving to people? I think that's really key.
So, but to round out what you're saying is that, as homeopaths, by definition, we are prescribing according to the principle of similars, unless we're not. And actually, when you think about it, a lot of prescribing using homeopathic remedies or remedies that are, quote, homeopathic, are not being prescribed according to similars because a case isn't being taken. A named condition is being attended to in a very allopathic way, in a from my point of view, in an embarrassingly simplistic allopathic way, at a time when allopathic medicine is painfully realizing the error of its ways and transforming where it can with motivational interviewing and all sorts of changes to educational curricula where possible, to have the homeopaths hearing a name and giving a nosode based on that name, or a combination or a protocol or a whatever. It's just like, well, what's just happened? How did that happen? Hello? How did that happen? To prescribe on a named condition is not similars. It might be same, but it's not similars.
And it's really interesting. And again, in the spirit of not calling out, but just kind of just reporting what's happening. This week, the Banerjees, or this week, maybe it was last week, the time goes together. In the last couple of weeks,
Mm.
the Banerjee family has come out with a statement saying that folks in the United States have not been, and I guess around the world, but they did name one person for whom it's not my place to name, but that there are folks who have taken their protocols and they have sort of rejiggered them to monetize them in a way that they do not have authorization for. And it was really interesting because, and I think this is kind of, it's a little bit in the third prong of analysis and everything. But well, one of the things that we haven't talked about that I think is too big a topic to add to this, but it's sort of about, another conversation is about the education part of it. And how do we create the next generation of homeopaths? How do we really scale this up in a way that people can do a good job? Because we don't want to have happen what happened in the 1870s to 1900s, early 1900s, when homeopathy just crashed and burned because people were using it in ways that were not appropriate. But what's interesting about the Banerjees is that, talk about this commodification idea. What they're saying is, look, we are a large not-for-profit, generations of medical doctors who are serving this community for whom there would not otherwise be medical intervention. I mean, the intentionality there is really important. And one of the things that that the one video, she said, my grandfather didn't get into this fight because he's too busy taking care of his patients, which really just touched my heart. Because what they're doing, is they're looking, they're doing what we would call small totality prescribing. And they've created, because I love how she referred to them as living, breathing. These protocols are living and breathing and changing over time. And they are meant to be used by these doctors who are participating in a critical review process of the efficacy. And because they change over time, they're looking at changes in disease patterns and so forth. And they say that if after 2 protocols, your condition is not better, then you seek out individualized care. And that's how they're able to take these folks, thousands of people, in places like Calcutta, and serve them. But that is a noble, honorable charity. And who could have a problem with that? I mean, that is ethical rigor in play. I mean, do you say ethical rigor? You know what I mean? Like but here in the United States, it's been completely monetized. Charging hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to according to the to the founders, to misappropriate their information. And so it goes to your point, Al, about they're using this, it's being used in America according to named conditions, right? It's like it's a this for that kind of thing. If you have insomnia, you take these remedies. I mean, and it's been taken too far. The pornography protocol, really? Like, that's not coming from Grandpa Banerjee.
The Banerjee I studied with, Parimal Banerjee, certainly didn't talk about a porn protocol, but what he did was be very, very clear about, when he was teaching groups of either professional homeopaths or doctors, about the use of these remedies, is that you must work with a professional homeopath, because as Denise said, after 2 doses, if the client is not improving, and improving meaning as the management of the case changes and symptoms and signs demonstrate improvement, that's a skilled thing to do sometimes, not a simple thing to do. Then you get yourself to that individualized homeopath, that professional homeopath, or that medical doctor real quick.
Right, because I think if we take this 3-prong thing I was talking about, that's like at the core, right? And then there are all these sort of, drop the pebble in the pond. There's the education, and then there's all the sort of best practices and safety, because every time you give a homeopathic remedy, I like to call them a medicine, because I think it helps us take it more seriously. You think about a remedy, it's like a cough remedy where you're putting a little manuka honey and some, and some cayenne pepper in your tea in order to open up your, sinuses. It's not that. And as we've talked about with the different aphorisms, it's like this, it's got this beautiful thing around it. So there's both the, I mean, I guess in a little bit we've kind of gone broader in the
Well, we've just
conversation today.
well, we just pursued that third area that you were talking about,
Yeah.
which is about your clinical decision making and the basis upon which you're making your decisions. And the basis upon which Hahnemann made his decision was really clear. In the first unpublished repertories,
Yeah.
there is pure proving symptoms. There's no clinical data in the repertory. You look at the repertory today. I mean, what was I doing? I was doing a clinic yesterday, and the presenting complaint was polycystic ovarian syndrome, and there's now a rubric, and it's got a whole lot of Zs, and it's got a whole lot of clinical information put there by some of our friends and colleagues. But that rubric didn't exist before, and now it does, and the information all comes from the clinical domain, not the proving domain.
It makes me nervous.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't
I
tend to use those rubrics.
It's an autoimmune condition. It's just
Right.
Autoimmunity is like it's a multi-systemic expression of
Maybe yeah, let's just pursue that one, because you might be wondering what's the difference between a clinical piece of information and a proving piece of information and the quality of it. If you've got a symptom like a headache and you get a really, really good night's sleep, in the morning your headache's going to be gone, right? Now, that is exactly what's gone on in the evolution of the repertory. And some folks are not that happy about it. The headache rubric should be full of remedy possibilities, whereby that substance creates a headache in a healthy person, right? I take a dose of Moreton Bay Fig and my head kills me, and therefore MBF gets inserted into that rubric. But that's different from, I had a great case the other day, mate, and this person, they had this, they had that, they had terrible insomnia, and they also had wicked migraines. And I gave this remedy, and I gave the remedy, make it up, Kanuka honey, whatever, and all of these symptoms disappeared, and therefore I'm adding all of these symptoms into the repertory? No, because the vital force starts to flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
The resilience, the internal resilience of the person that took that remedy starts to kick in again. And of course, symptoms are going to get better. And symptoms that have nothing to do with the impression that was made on that vital force. The vital force is different to this. The cure comes from this, not that. This is just the right key in the keyhole.
I'm laughing because if someone's listening to this podcast and not watching the video, still interpretive dancing, but this time to his own beat. So he's basically doing the sort of the way that when we give a substance to a healthy person, it's the primary and secondary action. The secondary action is the organism's response to the application of the substance. Anyway, we both do the same. I never really watched you do that. We have hand gestures that
All right.
and they're the same. We're doing the same interpretive dance.
Iris Bell.
I think, I call, what I call her, the intermediary with the force. Iris Bell, if you're listening, Iris Bell's probably not listening to us, but if you are, know that you got super fans over here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think we probably are hitting time.
Are you kidding?
How long have we been going?
I don't know. I'm on a roll.
I know, but we're meeting your sister in 45 minutes. But anyway, where we were going with this?
Where have we gone with this?
That I've been looking at is just trying, because we're trying to find a way to bring everybody into this conversation of sort of like, are there ways that we can learn from experiences of other kind of modalities or other, right? And so I've been just looking at yoga because I find that there's this way in which yoga and homeopathy have such similar, you can use similar language to describe it, and because it's not a medical modality, although there is yoga therapy, right? And there's therapeutic yoga. We look at it really differently. And so I've been looking at the ways in which this idea of scaling up yoga has had all of these implications, and it's been fascinating, right? So one of the things that was really interesting, that there's one thread I've been having trouble really pulling into homeopathy, and that's sort of the cultural appropriation. So there's this way in which the Western culture looks to Eastern sort of religious practices as this sort of, this kind of this different spiritual, I don't know, experience, different than like what we would consider organized religion. So a lot of counterculture people left their sort of, religions to join in, wearing, whatever, flowing robes and stuff, trying to be, take on someone else's culture. But
That was the 60s.
that was, I mean, even the Beatles, right, went through their, so it's interesting because homeopathy sort of was a part of a counterculture experience. We joke about how, like what you used to wear when you were in teaching. Homeopathy. I mean, people didn't really wear shoes. We sat on beanbag chairs. I mean, there was like there sort of was a hairy hippie vibe associated with it. And it's quite different now. And it's become, I mean, it's kind of got its own thing, but it's moved from this counterculture in this attempt to like catapult into this incredibly mainstream experience. Now, I love the fact that you can get homeopathic remedies, OTC for self-limiting conditions. We have a little bit of a conundrum because we sort of want availability, but homeopathic remedies, because if you don't know how you're using them, you could be choosing a deep acting antisoric remedy like sulfur, OTC, and taking it for 30 days and winding up with God knows what. Anyway, so the other piece in this puzzle is how do we create sort of leadership within the profession of people who really know how to do it, who want to spend the time to truly learn homeopathy, as opposed to creating the express lane where people are learning incredibly superficial homeopathy, learning kind of cookie cutter remedies, giving like a glass full of all the stuff, confusing the vital force out of its health and getting what seems like a short-term gain. So I've been looking for sort of ways to describe this. And I just have a couple that maybe we'll close with and we can talk about it more later. But I found there's a non-for-profit called Yoga Campus. And I found an article, Rethinking the 200-Hour Yoga Teacher Training, Evolving with the Yoga Market. And I thought, 200 hours now to become a yoga teacher. I mean, I did yoga teacher training 100 years ago. And it was like, I remember when I first started going to yoga, it was like you had to find a yoga teacher and like, it's like weird a little bit. And, you kind of have to get used to like all the incense and it was like a lot. And now you go to the gym. And I love that like seniors can go to the gym and be sitting down and doing chair yoga to be able to get more flexibility and movement and everything. But it's like, those are two really different things. It was like a lot of training to learn about yoga.
Yeah, those are two separate things. The availability, as something grows, then it's less available and then becomes more available. But what you're talking about is essentially the depth of what's being taught, right?
Because, to learn how to sit somebody in a chair to do some stretching exercises, and you can call them by their Sanskrit names. I mean, that's totally okay if you have an understanding of all of what's happening. It's not just stretching. Anywho, I just want to read this quote. This is a quote from this yoga campus I was talking about. Again, it's a not-for-profit, right? So it said, as the challenges of making a living as a yoga teacher continue to grow, combined with the vast number of 200-hour courses on offer, it does feel that we are now witnessing a dysfunctional industry that in many cases commodifies level 1 training for profit. And I was like, whew, that really like it hit like a stone, didn't it? Because, there's all this conversation about how, can you or can you not make a living as a homeopath? I mean, if you're a good homeopath, if you're good at anything, you're going to make a living.
Yep.
If you glut the market with mediocrity, then it becomes everybody is sort of scrambling to find their place. And then everybody has to create their brand online to be able to stand out in a cacophony. And it becomes then about brand image as opposed to quality, right? So like one of the things I've been thinking about are what are the consequences of lowering the bar for the entry points into a profession, and especially in we have this basically an unregulated profession, right? So like so I'm making lists of the challenges and scaling up. My little list of my little stickers. Anyway, So one of the challenges in scaling up is you've got influencers, right? So in today's culture, not just in homeopathy, but you've got these like influencer programs. So anybody who's got like a really incredible Instagram presence can get people to buy what they're selling. Get a good ring light, pose with your organon, right? Read as if you understand it. Yeah. And you can get people to buy into it. Well, fine, right? Except what happens when you're oversimplifying complex clinical work, right? Well, you have to find shortcuts. So if you have a school, so like if you look at AHE, for example, people are like, you guys have, somebody wrote to us, a howler, that we were like the man and that we had like this giant school. We're like not a giant school. Our biggest cohort, I think, has had less than 40 people. I mean,
35 people.
35 people in a class, one-to-one attention. We're calculating actually the number of people. We have 38 people on our team. Actually, no, that's 38 people in the United States. I think we're 42 if you count people outside. And that's 42. That includes like our IT person, like stuff like that, right? But we've got like people who are doing these specialized jobs for student support. Because if you try to scale up, could you imagine if we had like 600 students? How could you service those people? Who's supervising the cases to make sure that that somebody is like watching what a person does? Because this is a consequence of being in an unregulated market. And I'm not, just because I'm saying that, I'm not saying I'm pro like regulate everything, but I'm saying that if it doesn't exist, right? If external moderation, if the biggest thing is ACHINA, right? So ACHINA is the accrediting body for education. And the CHC, which has been our certifying body for more than 20 years, said you don't need to go to an accredited school. Then how are we saying that we are actually working toward the highest standards of self-regulation? Because like if that's what we want, if we don't want somebody on the outside to do it, then how are we not raising standards internally? That's an ethical failure, I think. And that's not to say that they're bad people. It's to say that the structure that we've created, right? The structure rewards oversimplification and commercial confidence. So you've got these groups on Instagram who are going on, right? People who are just learning homeopathy, who are like, I've had a great case. I'm curing cancer, and I've gotten the ALS people off their ventilators, and I've gotten like that. I just don't understand. So like, I want in closing, I want us to sort of, let's just go back and acknowledge like it's hard, but it's not doable. You just have to work at it, and it's worth it. Right? So if we kind of work together to actually raise the standards instead of trying to like have this glut of mediocrity where the best way that people can do it is to try to make money by selling more and more and more convoluted products. Fibonacci home accord, listen to the post that we did, the podcast we did a couple of times ago. It's a made up thing, right? So let's do this together. We can. There's so many like amazing homeopaths out there. Let's do
it. That's it.
That's it.
Well, no. Let's
No.
set it up for the next one, because I was really interested with what you were saying, because I would have gone about your discussion about yoga really differently. Because you're right about in the past, yoga therapy, it was something much more than free up my frozen shoulder.
Totally. There's a lot more to talk about with that.
Yeah, because of course yoga has been divorced from and separated from surgically its true cultural context. So yoga is an integral part of Ayurveda, and Ayurveda is the discipline more than any other that's been chopped up and broken up and into its component parts and commodified. With aromatherapy over there, and detoxification over there, and panchakarma over there, and all the rest of it. But the discipline itself, there's still, I think there's still a beating heart in there.
Oh my gosh, totally. That's why actually wrapping a bow around it, because we went a little tangentially, was the reason I started with Aphorism 9, and it was to be able to clearly make the connection to the yoga part of it, which is that there is there is a potentiality. It's not the requirement, but there's this potentiality within homeopathy that we are actually reaching the highest or the higher level of our existence. And it's worth looking out for. That Hahnemann had this much more, there's so much more capacity in it that we can reach out for, which is what yoga has with it, right?
It's really interesting because there's a conversation to be had about just the way that things evolve. I mean, things evolve. Christianity, if you're in a tradition or a part of a corner of Christianity, churches come and go.
Yeah.
Or acupuncture has changed. It's evolved depending on the context that it lands in. So traditional Chinese medicine has evolved. But then there's what you're talking about, which I really appreciate, is the commodification of it. Is that the word?
That's the thing.
Commodification
It's
of it.
it's a neoliberal concept, right? And it's this idea that when we favor policies that promote free market capitalism.
Yeah.
And so if that's what we're doing, we're looking to deregulate to promote free market capitalism of something that has an ethical conversation attached to it, where there are all of these things that we need to be talking about. That and when I'm talking about that ethics, we're talking about giving medicine to children or to any sick person, but children, because the children they're not consenting. Parents are consenting.
Yeah.
And so we're not honest with the parents of what we don't know. And we present with this incredible confidence, right? I mean, I shouldn't say it, but we've had several experiences recently where we've got people who are coming to our clinic, where we've got these students who are working so hard. They've got, hundreds of hours of deep study under their, the example I'm going to use.
I feel like,
Under their belt of learning just how to get into the acute clinic, and they're supervised, right? So you've got someone with tons of experience supervising the student. They spent all this time working on a case, and then they find out that the person didn't take the remedy they recommended because they used a pendulum or they muscle tested and they gave something else. And then they're mad that they didn't get the results that they wanted. How is that even possible in this conversation? Anyway, can I just say one more thing, and then we have to go because we're meeting your sister for a drink. I'm excited. Anyway, okay.
Go.
I was I remember there's this case that happened recently, where there was a school system in California that was teaching yoga, and some parents got upset because they said that was part of it was a religious teaching. And I think it's an interesting conversation to have because it is based on spiritual practices. So, I mean, it's true, but I think you also can, in the case of yoga, teach kids, breathing and mindfulness and, kind of quiet sitting without attaching a religious dogma to it. I think that's totally possible to do. Just like you can get a remedy if you were in an ambulance and aconite was a part of the best, of the standard of care, you wouldn't have to believe in Aphorism 9 in order to not go into shock. Like these things can exist, right? But like as people who are delivering this service, we are, I think we're obligated to understand it. Anyway, what was so interesting is I went down a rabbit hole of looking at what were the arguments that were made to how, because it was taken out of the school system. The case was lost, right? And so, or no, sorry, I tell a lie. The case was won. And the argument was, and I'm quoting here, quote, yoga, as it has developed in the last 20 years, is rooted in American culture, not Indian culture. It is a distinctly American cultural phenomenon.
You're kidding me.
No, here's my quote.
That was used in court?
In court. This was a ruling by the San Diego Superior Court judge. This was and you can look this up. It was Encinitas, California, a lawsuit followed by the parents that yoga equaled religion. And so the judge ruled yoga, actually is an American phenomenon. And so, I mean, good, bad, or otherwise, right? If you're looking at it for the commodification standard.
Bikram yoga.
Well, we didn't even get into Bikram, right? So, there's commodification, and Bikram is sort of like, to me, the Bikram is the hot yoga guy who, oh my gosh, he claims to have made gajillions of dollars, but he basically took 26 foundational yoga poses, he put them in a, in a sequence. You do each one twice. It's like the McDonald's of yoga. You know what you're going to get. He dictated the room. It had to have carpet, which I think of all the things, because
Just the smell.
smell.
Oh my God.
But you are always looking in the mirror, and as a former dancer, like, to me, I like that because I like to see my position. But he said you're not in competition with anyone else, only with yourself. But like all these things. But then he said he tried to copyright it and make it his, just like the copywriting of these protocols.
Copywriting something ancient and
Yeah. Yeah, and he tried to feed the country, but not out, not before he made $1 bazillion. And so, and then of course there were all these ethical breaches, because once you sort of go outside of your ethics, like, what's on the table? I don't know. But now we've got, yoga taught by second, third, fourth, fifth generation people who are removed from the philosophies and the origins of the practice.
Yeah.
Right. And repurposed to fit a capitalistic Western market. Right.
Isn't that amazing? Yoga is American.
I mean, can you believe it? Yoga, as it has developed in the last 20 years, is rooted in American culture. It's like, oh my gosh. But one could argue that it is, just like one could argue that, these protocols or whatever are. And so then you have to ask the question, is a child, right? Because I think I wanted to end with something ambiguous, because I don't want this to, like, I just want us to think.
Yeah.
Because we have to grapple with this, and we have to ask really hard questions, and we have to trust ourselves to have hard conversations and not enter into something with, I think that's what makes conversation interesting, right? And so how can we, how many ways can we have it? Right? This one's going to really get you, right? Like, yoga as an American phenomenon.
Oh, God.
I know, it's kind of gobsmacking, except that, isn't it nice if you've got kids who are in a school system where maybe they're not getting enough outside time, maybe they're, you've got to, because this particular school system got a grant where they could have yoga in the schools, and they were finding that there were less kids, under stress and all of these things. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
So if the way that we get that in is to say it's devoid of all of its whatever, I mean, the question that we would have to ask if I'm making this argument is, can homeopathy be devoid of Aphorism 9? I mean, I suppose it could. You don't have to believe in Aphorism 9.
Call it something else.
I don't know. I don't think you don't have to have like some belief in it. Like, that's why I'm using the example. If a midwife gave a woman who had stalled labor coliphylum and she went into labor, does she have to believe that she's going to reach her highest potential? No, but she might have survived, not getting a C-section.
Huh.
Right? So you don't have to. But the question isn't about the end user. The question is, as a practitioner or as an educator, or, we could take it to the next level. If we're talking about commoditization, should a manufacturing process, should someone who's manufacturing the remedies have to have some level of understanding about releasing spirit from matter? Should they have to read Aphorism 270, or is it just about, do they have clean water and a good ventilation system and follow OSHA practices in their factory? If the remedies are acting, maybe it doesn't matter. But if the remedies, and that's above my pay grade, right? But if we are, as practitioners, prescribing remedies for which we don't have approving, and we are learning homeopathy from a second, third, or fourth generation thing, or from some, an influencer, and who's just telling you give this or that, at what point do we all have an ethical obligation to have a conversation about how we should understand what, the evolution of this modality is? That's our conversation. That's what we have to be thinking of, I think, anyway.
Folks, that's called critical thinking.
Three-pronged critical thinking thing. Three-pronged critical thinking thing. Oh my
It's the
God.
title of your second album.
Oh, does anybody play that game where you like say something funny and then you go, oh, that's a title for my memoir, or a chapter in my memoir, or a drag queen name? Like having, do you ever do that?
Not the drag queen, but definitely the title of my, third novel, or my fourth album.
You need to get out more.
All right.
All right. Hey, everybody. I hope that having these conversations is getting you thinking. I hope that we can really start engaging in these critical conversations, thinking about them for the good of all. And I hope I don't get another howler. It makes me sad.
Oh, when you're a critical thinker and you get a howler.
People call us names. that woman who wrote the letter. The recent one? I'll tell you about it after. Anyway, greetings from tomorrow. See ya.
Got a packed schedule, but still dreaming of becoming a homeopath? AHE's part-time professional program brings real-time classes, live clinical training, and a full professional curriculum, all 100% online. It's rigorous. It's legit. And yes, it's built for people who have jobs, kids, lives, and a whole lot of ambition. Start your journey to licensure without hitting pause on your life. Visit ahe.online and take the first step.